Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Life After DD214. Today, I have with me a really special guest, Kevin Parker. Kevin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing absolutely fine, Rob. How are you?
Oh, man, I'm hanging in there, living the dream.
Good.
So, Kevin, you and I met really when I deployed the first time. That was 2009, 2010, because I was a logistics officer in FSC. You were not a logistics NCO. You were a combat arms NCO who we borrowed so that we could run security for our convoys.
That is correct. Yeah, I was selected or sifted out. I'm not sure how to put it. I was a 19 Delta Cav Scout. Told, yeah. I was a Cav Scout, and I was selected. It was myself and I was staff sergeant. There was a sergeant, and then there was two sergeants. One was a 19 Delta, other was 11 Bravo, that were selected to go over to the FSC or FST, to run security for the S&T platoon for logistics runs from Camp Taji to JSS Istiqlal. And we were given We're given 88 mics, 92 Fox. I forget what the water purification. I forget that MOS, but we're given a couple of what they called water dogs. We're given a couple of those to make a security section out of it. And so, and once we had those soldiers in place, we did some training. We did some some of the stuff, the react to contact, basic convoy movements and things like that are 10 level skills. And your basic level, every soldier should know, especially when you get ready to go to Iraq. Back in those days, we were all told how to do this stuff, especially if you're in any kind of way, if you're mounted, in a vehicle or whatever, you kind of have the basics. But we did. And then also our platoon sergeant, he was a 19 Delta as well, and he was sent over with us. And so, with his guidance, we put together training, and we created a security section out of these soldiers between myself and the other two NCOs. And we were given Max Pros, RG 33s, which were the big school buses, and some Humvees. And it's like, hey, here's your stuff, some 50 cows, 240 Bravos, go make a security section. And I think we did pretty good. We did, man, I used to have the exact number. I've got it written down somewhere in my records. We did over 300 missions in 10 months between Taji and the JSS. And we
also did a couple other random missions. We went down to Liberty a couple of times.
We did
down in the green zone.
Yep. Because we had to run down there to get parts. Yeah.
Yep. We also had to randomly pick up some people at the PAX terminal.
We did. Yeah. We're sent down there after. We actually brought some. There was one time we came back with like a whole bunch of colonels, 05s, like lieutenant colonels, like the RG-33s were full of field grades. And I'm like, what? What is bringing them back to Taji is like, what are we, a taxi service? But we did, so that's, yeah, but you're exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other thing though, is that not only did you guys create this security section, but you also cross-trained, right? You also picked up logistics. For example, I remember the other two NCOs, they would go out to the warehouse, where there was the DFAC warehouse, where there was the SSA, where there was X, Y, or Z, and they were coordinating with logistics elements to load trucks, not just worrying about the security section, but you're also loading the PLS, LHS.
LHS, yep. PLS, yeah.
And then also all the trailers that go with that, yeah.
Yep, that was something too. And as a matter of fact, Sergeant Keaton, he loved driving those trucks. He made it a point to learn how to drive everything in the platoon, and he wanted Sergeant McDonald, Sergeant Harbin to know how to do it too. So he traded us out. I stayed with the security section, but he traded those two guys out with logistics NCOs and had them swap places. So we would cross train, and which now their job, and I'm not trying to minimize anything, but their job as a TC in the security section was to know the battlefields. What are the reactor contract drills and whatever. So it was kind of easy to spin them up. On the other hand, when you've got a 3-axle truck hooked to a 3-axle trailer, and you're making that turn off of Pluto to Tampa, and you it's a little different for logistics guys. So, and then tying things down, it's not just a matter of taking a ratchet strap and tying it down. You've got check to loads, and it was different, especially for those guys. And so I still tell people to this day, and I mean, it's been years since I've worked in any kind of environment like that. And I'm not even in the Army anymore. But I tell guys, one of my best friends here in El Paso is a retired 88 Mike. And I told him when I first met him, and I learned he was an 88 Mike, I said, I have so much respect for y'all. Because we worked so hard, especially in that first 6 or 7 month window. There was times we were running 2 missions a day. We would hit the motor pool at 13. Well, initially we're hitting the motor pool at 9 o'clock, and we wouldn't leave the motor pool until like 03 the next morning. And we did that for 3 or 4 months straight. No day off. We were running, I mean, hard, while they were building up the JSS. And it just, those, I mean, God, and Sergeant Dooley, we called him. He told us, he said, yeah, y'all don't realize, y'all meaning the scouts within the squadron. He said, y'all don't realize how hard we work. And I'm like, I do now. And my God, I wish you'd stop. We were just hardcore, and it just, I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. It was just so much work. And so, but now I tell guys to this day, man, logistics guys, you just don't understand how hard they work. And I'm assuming it's the same in the private sector. I mean, I don't know. But in the Army, military, so logistics guys work, and but we ran hard. And those NCOs, you mentioned cross training, I'll go back to that. When they would come back to, we called it the gun section and the cargo section. It's kind of like how easy it was to break down. When they would come back to the security section, they're like, my God, so much work, They appreciated what they did, and when we got back to the rear after the deployment, they kind of shared that, with their peers in the combat arms community. They would hear guys talking trash or whatever about the FSC, FST, and the guys within that, how they don't do anything. No. They wouldn't put up with it. And like, no, those guys work. You just don't understand how hard they work. So yeah, it was a very enlightening deployment for sure. Yeah.
And also logistics, the way logistics works is you're not supposed to know we're working as hard as we are. Right? The fact that you look at us and you see that we're, not doing anything, but you have everything that you need when you need it, means that we did what we were supposed to do, and you didn't even realize that we were working. So,
yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, because the JSS, when we first got there, the JSS was a company-sized JSS. So it was an infantry company there, which is 100 or so, whatever people, 120 people or whatever it was for an infantry company. I don't remember these things, thank God. I'm not meant to remember. But and then we put a cavalry squadron on there, which is 3 troops of about 90 people a troop or whatever. So you put 3 of them on there, plus the FSC. So the FSC is much, much bigger, of course, because of all the mechanics and the cooks, etc. All those support personnel. But it grew a lot. They put in a basketball, for crying out loud, a boxing ring, all these MWR things too. Yep. So it was big. A helipad, and then a track around the helipad. It was a nice JSS when we finished up, And so lights everywhere. It was a very nice Colonel Costanza. He was the squadron commander, and he and the Sergeant Major Ripley. They did a lot of good things out there on the JSS, and tried to make life, between missions, if you will, as good as they could. And the S&T platoon, were the driving factor behind it. Because everything that happened on JSS, we brought the stuff over there. And so, and when I mean, the I think the motor pool was operating out of a Connex when we first got there. It was, I mean, a 60-foot long Connex or whatever. That's where all the automation, all that stuff that happens in the motor pool was happening out of a Connex. They built an office, so all that plywood and all the lumber came through. It's incredible. It was absolutely incredible to see all that happen and to see that come up. And then what made me kind of sad is when we left, an infantry company took over again because we were drawing down, starting, it was the beginning of the drawdown for Iraq. So an infantry company took over and everything just kind of got, like squished down into this company size again. And so they, and it made me kind of sad because it was kind of a nice place. And then it was all this footprint shrunk, it shrank down to the footprint. And they literally moved in the T-walls and all this stuff. And it was just kind of like this little tiny place. And it made me sad, but it is what it is. I mean, I wasn't going to live there, so I didn't care, but it made me kind of sad. So,
understandable.
Yeah. But it was fun. It was fun. But yeah, that's where I met you. And that's, you were team leader for, I don't know how many, I can't remember how often. I know we had you and then we had Orrit.
He was after
and then
me.
There was, I forget her name.
Robertson.
There was a female lieutenant too. Robinson. There you go. Yep. That was the 3 I remember. So yeah. Yep. There you go.
So Robertson was there first.
Robertson.
Because you were talking about you were talking about the maintenance connex. That was my office that I shared with 3 other men.
Oh, no kidding.
Yep. It was me, the maintenance tech, the maintenance NCO, the FSR. We all shared that one connex. That was our office. And then I remember that day that the engineers came out. They built the DFAC. And because they were not planning on building an office for the maintenance section, a couple of other people got volunteered to build the office. And then when I became the S&T platoon leader, I remember specifically that exact mission that you're talking about, where we had to go get the rhino snot in order to create the helipad.
Yes.
That was one of our missions, to go down to Liberty, pick it up, and then come back. So
Yep. That's exactly right. Yeah, I remember that.
That was an interesting mission in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we would get hit with it. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. We could talk about that all day.
Yeah, we could. We really could. So let's jump back to the beginning, since we kind of just like forced our way into the middle here. Let's jump back to the beginning. Why and when did you decide to join the Army?
Wow. Oh boy, that was a long time ago. So I'm going to try to keep this as concise as I can. Okay. I first joined the Army. I'm an old dude. Okay. Mm-hmm. I first joined the Army in '86. Okay. And your watchers are now like, my gosh, that guy's old. Yes, I am. My now wife, then girlfriend's brother, joined the Army. He said, "Hey, Kevin, if you join the Army, I get an extra stripe." I wasn't doing anything. I graduated high school. I was like, okay. So I went to the recruiter's office and I was like, hey, my brother-in-law said, or my girlfriend's brother said, if I join the Army, he gets a stripe or whatever. And so I took the ASVAB and I scored high enough and all this stuff. So I joined the Army. I was so it's first from '86 to '89. I was in the Army as a tactical satellite communications guy. Right. Okay. So, and that was with the big 8-foot dish. Some people are probably familiar with those. I did that for a while. Then I came out, went into the Guard for a year. They had a program called Try One in the Guard. So you go into the National Guard for a year. If you like it, stay in. If you don't, get out. So I did 1 year in the Guard. And then
was this like a random Army program that they were, trying to do?
So it seemed that way back then. When I was getting ready to ETS, I was in Korea, as a matter of fact, when I was ETSing the first time, and they said, you've got to go as part of your clearing. You got to go talk to the retention officer, NCO. And I went in, and I was a really, really, really cynical specialist. And I walked in, and I said, I'm not re-enlisted right off the bat. It was a staff sergeant. He's, additional duty kind of thing. And he said, well, I got to show you that your options anyway. I said, well, then fine. Everything was either infantry, field artillery or whatever. I'm like, I'm not doing it. And it was 89, right? I'm like, I'm not freaking doing this. And so he said, okay, well, you got to talk to, what I know now is Compo 2, Compo 3. What was back then was, reserve component. You got to talk to those guys too. And this is when the National Guard recruiter or the reserve recruiter, he said, you talk to the National Guard because they have a program now. Try one in the Guard. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. So went to see them as a different office or whatever. Went to see them, and that's when he said, yeah, you can try one. And I'm like, what does that mean? And he said, you can go into National Guard in your state for 1 year, and if you like it, you can sign an additional contract and do, because I think it was a 4-year minimum. You can do an additional 3 that meets your 4-year minimum. And if you don't like it, your 1 year is your only requirement. I was like, man, 1 year, I can do anything for a year, And so, I mean, and you get $200 a month or whatever. And it's just a bunch of good old boys from North Carolina, sitting around and, talking trash to each other. So I can do that. And so I did. And then, but what kind of drove me crazy about that was I was used to, and I think you mentioned when we were talking before we started, how we were talking about structure and how you get used to a certain amount of structure. Well, going from active duty for 3 years, even though I wasn't too fond of it, and I'll get to that in a second, I wasn't too fond of it, but going from active duty to National Guard, where every day on active duty, especially in the 80s, because the Cold War was still going on and all that stuff, we had a certain, we had a training schedule. We had, things we were supposed to do. We had readiness to look after. We had vehicles to look after. We had commo equipment to, do. We had everything we had to take care of. When National Guard, we would literally go to the motor pool, which was grass. We had a grass motor pool. And so, which contractors cut for us. We didn't cut the grass. We would open up the communication shelter, wouldn't even hook up the generator or anything. We'd just open up the communication shelter and then just sit there and talk to each other for 8 hours. That's all we did. And I was like, are we going to do any Army stuff or what? And we never did any Army stuff. We put on a uniform, sure, but then we would go and open up the communication shelter. And then we would talk to each other for 8 hours. It drove me nuts. I was like, but maybe we could, and I talked to my team chief, because again, I was a specialist. I talked to my team chief and I was like, hey, why don't we could do a dish loop back, because you hook up the dish and you do a loop back. It's basically just testing the communications equipment from the transmission side to the dish and back through the reception side. It's easy to do. You don't have to set anything up. You just literally just hook the dish up. You don't even have to really move anything much. And he'd be like, no, we got other stuff. I gotta go to a meeting. I'm like, what meeting? You're a corporal. A meeting? We didn't do anything. It drove me crazy, Rob. Crazy. I was like, oh my gosh, dude. So, but that's what it was like the whole time. And I was like, I can't do this. So I got out. Anyway, long story short, I got out. And so I went through some civilian jobs after that. And I wound up as a welder in a commercial oven factory, which was kind of fun. And there was a guy there, and I think he might have been on the autism spectrum, because he wasn't that smart, but he was a really hard worker, but he loved everything about the military, specifically rotary wing aircraft. He could tell you every spec on every rotary wing aircraft in the Army's inventory. He even had a shirt that had an Apache on it that said, don't run, you'll only die tired, that kind of guy. And when he found out I used to jump out of airplanes, because I was airborne during my first enlistment, he said, hey, Kevin, man, tell me a story about jumping out of airplanes. And I only had a couple. Most of them are very routine. You jump out, you hit the ground, you're done. But there was a couple that were kind of standoutish. And so I'd tell him about them. And I thought I was done with my stories, but he'd come up, hey, man, tell me another story. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I've told you about all of them. No, well, just tell me again. And it got me missing jumping out of airplanes. And so I had a conversation with Ginger, and I was like, well, what if I go back into reserves as a parachute rigger? I mean, 1 week in a month, and I do the rigger thing, and I go jump out of airplanes, and I get an extra $250 a month or whatever. It's not that big a deal. And she was like, yeah, why not? That sounds like an okay deal. So I went to the recruiter. I told her I wanted to go back in as a parachute rigger, and we lived near Fort Bragg at the time. So parachute rigger slots were kind of few and far in between. She said, well, let me get you a slot, and I'll find you one, and we'll be okay. I said, okay. So I was waiting for a slot when 9/11 happened.
Okay.
And I left work that day. I drove straight to the recruiter's office, and I said, I don't care what job, I don't care what state. Get me back in a uniform.
Mm-hmm.
Because that can't go unanswered.
Right.
And she said, let me see what I can do. Oh, she called me back like 2 days later, and she said, I found you a slot right here on Fort Bragg, but it's an admin specialist. And I was like, what is that? 42 Alpha or 42 Lima. And I was like, what is that? So, well, it's a small detachment here on Fort Bragg, and it's an admin specialist. And, you're basically doing paperwork. I said, I don't care. Get me in that slot. So, long story short, I'm not even going to the unit details because it's actually kind of a very niche unit at the time. Prisoner of War Information Center, PWIC. If anybody wants to Google it and all that stuff, you can do that on your own time. But it's a Prisoner of War Information Center. So it turns out there were only two. I don't even think they exist anymore, but or there might be down to one now. I think they closed one. The 138th PWIC is what I was part of. Got into that. We deployed just after Easter of 2003. And while I was gone, it was like we were on active duty orders for like 4 months. Mm-hmm. And Ginger and I both realized at the time, my wife Ginger, we realized that this active duty thing was actually not too bad. Okay. Like this is actually kind of cool. When I got back, I put in the paperwork for conditional release and then to go active duty. The 82nd RSC, which was part of what we were under, 82nd, I think, 81st RSC, which is what we're under. Now, we're in North Carolina. The battalion headquarters is in Florida. The battalion headquarters has to handle all this. They kept giving me excuses why they couldn't get the paperwork signed. It had to be a wet signature. And they kept giving me excuses why they couldn't sign it. This person deployed, so that was a person who had to sign it. Well, this person has to do assumption of command orders for that person to sign it. Or this person had to. I was going crazy. I was like, how hard is it to get on active duty? And so, because you have to have that before you can go to the recruiter to actually do the paperwork to get on active duty, right? And so I'm like, this is driving me nuts. So I did something, and I didn't realize what I had done at the time. And so, because it was interstate commerce, if you will, I went online and I went to my congressman's website, and I was like, hey, can you help me out with this? Because I'm having problems between two states. I don't know what to do. Right. I didn't know I was kicking off a congressional. I had no idea. I had no idea. And so the next drill weekend, my commander comes up to me. I was sitting on the door because 9/11, we had door guards. I was sitting on the door of the building, and he says, hey, Sergeant Parker, specialist, whatever his name was, he's going to take your place. Can you come with me? And I was like, sure. And he's got some paperwork in his hand, and we go over to the corner of the room or whatever, it's big lobby. He hands me, he says, here's your conditional release paperwork. He said, but can you do me a favor? I was like, what's that, sir? He said, the next time you want to call, start a congressional, can you let me know before? I was like, what? What are you talking about? And then he lets me know that by emailing, because I didn't, look, man, I'm in the reserves, dude. I don't know I had no idea. Because I had let my first sergeant know, the detachment sergeant, the unit administrator, all the people I thought should know knew that I was having these problems. And so, yeah, I'd done a congressional, had no idea. But I got my paperwork.
Hey, there you go.
I did. Yeah, hey, look, end result was I got my stuff. So, I went active duty. I didn't like I didn't like the idea of doing paperwork active duty, so I became a scout. Reclassed as a scout, did that for 5 years. That's where I met you. We did that deployment to Iraq. Then I realized I was way too old for that, man. I was in my late 30s, or mid approaching late 30s, and I was like, this is too much. So I became a counterintelligence special agent. And that's what I did for my last 10 years. I dropped a warrant packet, and then I got med boarded out, which we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But okay, that's a synopsis of my career. Now, to answer the question with more fidelity on why I went in. So I kind of went in twice, or kind of three times, right? I went in active duty the first time. I mean, that was because I wasn't doing anything. I just graduated, and I was a fast food manager. I was like, what am I going to do? This is not a career.
Right.
And then I went in the reserves.
As you mentioned, like, this is before Gulf War. This is like Cold War era. We're talking late 80s, early 90s. Right. We're nothing's kicked off. We're peacetime, and
Right.
So yeah, well, I understand completely where you're thinking. Like, well, I got nothing else going on with my life.
It kind of was peacetime, but back then, and it's people say that the Army is different. I did get to see two different versions of the Army between the 80s and then the Army from which I retired. Right, there was two different armies. For instance, being in Korea in '89 versus being in Korea in 2017, very different. I'm not talking about, because Korea as a country has come a long way over that 20, 30 years. But the Army, the op tempo, the command climate, all that. And I say that Korea is a microcosm, I think, for the Army as a whole, from what I experienced. Because when I was in the Army the first time, we just knew that any day the Soviet Union was going to finally have enough and start pushing buttons, or was going to cross the Iron Curtain and start kicking things off. We just knew it was going to happen. That was the attitude that we used for all of our training. We're communications. So we were pogues, man. We were, and we would go set up, when I was at Fort Bragg, we would set up our communication stuff right on the edge of Sicily drop zone. And we would watch, like, 1st and 505th PIR jump in, and we knew that was our Op 4. And they would set up on the other side of the drop zone, and we knew at about 03, they were going to come through and just destroy us. We knew it was going to happen. And there was nothing as a communications unit we could do to stop it. Nothing. And they would destroy us, right? We had Miles gear at the time, or we had something, like a very, very early version of Miles gear, and we had blanks and stuff, but they didn't care. They would come through and destroy us. They would not literally to the point of damage, but they would tear down stuff, unplug generators, pull up ground rods. They would make it to where life was miserable for us for the next several hours, right? Because that was their job. Their commander knew this is what we can do to really make this communications, organization's life miserable. They'd steal our guidons, the whole 9 yards, And so, because we as a DA overall knew that when the Red Scare happened, it was going to be much worse. Mm-hmm. So at gas, we got CS'd all the time, because that was the big thing, right? Because mustard gas was everywhere. We knew that as soon as they attacked, they were going to hit us with mustard gas. We knew that was going to happen. So many things that we knew. You feel me? We knew these things were going to happen. When I was in Korea in '89, we knew that at any moment, MiGs were going to come across that border and start dropping bombs. We knew that was going to happen, which is probably why I drank so much when I was in Korea the first time. But we knew these things were going to happen. We just knew it, right? And then Reagan stood up there and said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." And then the Soviet Union kind of just fizzled away, and suddenly it wasn't going to happen. Mm-hmm. But I would say that being in the Army was more intense prior to 9/11. It was more intense than going into the Army post 9/11, knowing you're going to deploy, right? And then operating in a COIN environment versus LISCO, the large-scale combat operations versus COIN is what we're talking about, really. And so it was very different. COIN was more, we got this little fob here, and all the fobists are on the fob, and the shooters go out and they do their patrols, and they come back and they bring the intel guys or stuff, and you got some intel guys and stuff. It's just a very different vibe. So I got to see both of those in my military career. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that I got to see both sides of it. It was very interesting. But I did go in, like I said, I did go in 3 times. And so you asked me what my motivation was. When I went active duty the second time in 2004, there was a couple of different reasons, and was duty to country and duty to my family. And I think both of those get equal weight because I knew that there was a tremendous amount of security for my family from a financial standpoint, health standpoint, like health insurance, all those things, all the things that being in the civilian sector did not give them, being a member of the military could give them. And so that was one of the reasons, but also duty to country, because we were still riding that high, if you will, from 9/11 in 2004. We were still, on a deployment cycle and all that stuff. So I think that was probably why, and did I choose the right job? Hey, listen, I'm a big guy. I can tell you right now, I was not the best scout out there. I think that we did a good job as an S&T platoon. Would I have done a good job as a line scout? I don't know. I know who went to NTC, it's 50-50. But we did a great job as an S&T platoon, and I'm proud of what we did. So, but it did also make me think I'm too old for this, and I did an exceptional job as a CI guy. I was exceptional, and then the Army kicked me out, which we can get to. We'll get to that. But when the Army kicked me out, I was very, very bitter about it. We'll talk about it. So yeah.
Well, yeah, let's talk about it then. I think we're probably at that point. So you went CI, you put in a warrant packet, became a warrant officer, which took me by surprise because there was one day that I was going to yell at you, say Sergeant Parker, and all of a sudden you're like, it's Chief Parker. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I did. When I went counterintelligence, my first CI gig was in Hawaii. We had a large field office in Hawaii. There's field offices, for instance, Fort Polk. They had 2 agents for the longest time, 2. And that's just very, very small. In Hawaii, the field office had 22, 18 NCOs and 4 warrants, and a civilian were in that office. Now it was robust. We had, at any one given time, we had about, between 14 and 16 investigations. So it was a very, very busy office. As you can imagine, being in the center of the Pacific, Hawaii is a very, very attractive target for adversarial intelligence. USERPAC is there, the fleet's there. There's a whole lot of stuff in Hawaii that attracts adversarial intelligence. So we had a lot of activity going on while we were there. So it was really, really busy. I went in there and I took that job by the horns, and I didn't let go for 4 years. While I was there, I was exposed to 5 and 3 CW2s that worked in my MOS, as well as, several other intelligence warrant officers between HUMINT, GEOINT, all the other INTs that I worked with, that I liaised with, that were in the same unit I was in or whatever, that encouraged me to go warrant. As a matter of fact, I was on staff duty one night, and one of my buddies, he was a CW2 at the time, he came in and he said, "You started that package yet?" I said, "No, sir, I'm gonna, but I haven't yet." He said, do you need me to pull up the website right now while you're on staff duty? You can get it started. I mean, he was that adamant about me starting a packet. But the requirement was you needed 2 assignments as a CI sergeant, and I only had 1. And I didn't want to, throw it up there and then get denied.
Right.
And that was something to my mentor. My mentor was a senior CW2, and he agreed with that, waiting till my next assignment. He said, the guideline was 2 years in 2 assignments. He said, don't wait 2 years into your next assignment. As soon as you get there, drop the packet. Because by the time everything goes through, you'll have about 15 months or so, and they'll probably pick you up. And that's what I did. When I got to Fort Dix, New Jersey, I was talking actually to my NCOIC. He was a master sergeant. And I said, I feel like I owe it to the unit to give them about 6 months before I drop the packet. He was one of those guys. He was an all source intelligence analyst. He was one of those, no bull crap, right in your face kind of guy. He said, let me tell you what, you may think you owe the Army, but you don't owe the Army anything. The Army will use you and spit you out. If you're qualified right now, drop the packet. And I'm glad he told me that, because I don't want to sound dismissive. I don't want to sound disrespectful because I did really enjoy my service in the Army. But he's right. We're
Mm-hmm.
cogs in a wheel. We're very small cogs in this big machine, you know? And so he was right. If I left that unit, they'd have another one inbound in no time. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I drop a packet or not. So I started the packet. The battalion commander was overjoyed because he had never been in command of a unit that sent somebody to WOX. So he was he was really supportive. My mentor from Hawaii was right. It took about 16 months for that to go through, and then about 20 months for me to actually get to WOX. So it all worked out perfectly. So I went to warrant school, and then after there, I went to Korea, which seems to be a proving ground for new warrants because so many W01s walking around in Korea. It's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. It's like somebody took a big old dot shaker and shook it over Korea. There's so many dots, and so and then I went back to here at Fort Bliss. I was deputy ops at the field office here, and then the Army kicked me out. So, and let me get to that because I did. I was I very much enjoyed being a CI technician. And the Army, when I got here, we're elevation, and it's a great way to start this. When you go from sea level or near sea level and you go to elevation, your body has to acclimate. And I was a runner. I hate to categorize myself as that, but I did. I had in Hawaii, I had some health problems. I had a couple of surgeries on my gut. And as a way of convalescing from that, I started running. And okay. I used to hate running. I used to despise it. I would rather get a root canal than go for a run. But when I was in Hawaii, I really started enjoying running. Yeah. So I started enjoying running. And I did a marathon. I did 2 half marathons while I was there. And I just kept that up. When I went to Korea, I did a half marathon. I was running about 50 miles a week. And so I got here. I know. I don't know how it happened, but it happened. And so it became therapeutic for me. And so I was doing a lot of running. And so I got here, and same thing. I started looking for events to sign up for. There's an international marathon here where you actually run over into Mexico and back. I thought that'd be the coolest thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I started looking for these things. And then I started running. Of course, I started running. And my run time, because when you go from sea level to 3,800 feet, your run time drops just naturally. I kept looking for my run time to decrease, time per mile to decrease, but it never decreased. It kept increasing.
Okay.
And so, I started out about 9 minutes and 30 per mile, which I expected when I got here. I was like, that's about right compared to what I was running. That's average, for being at this elevation.
Yeah, and then it went to 10. Trying to acclimate. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, right. Then you think it's going to go down. But then it went to 10, right. 10:30, and 11. And then I can't pass my PT test. And 11:30. And I'm like, wait a minute, I can walk. I can walk this. 12. What is happening? I can't run. I can't breathe. It was all pulmonary. It wasn't muscular. It was pulmonary. My legs felt fine. My body felt okay. I just couldn't. My pulmonary system was not keeping up. And so I went to the doc and I was like, hey, something's happening. I can't. I'm tired all the time and something's just not happening. And so she said, well, it sounds like you're a good candidate for a sleep study. I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. So if you have sleep apnea, it affects a lot of things. So they sent me for a sleep study. The sleep study came back negative for sleep apnea. I didn't have sleep apnea. So the pulmonologist who was in charge of all the sleep study stuff, he does more stuff. And it turns out I had chronic bronchiolitis.
Oh,
which was indicative of being exposed to toxic burn pits.
No way.
And I was
like, where did he find toxic burn pits?
I don't know. I mean, all the places I've lived. Oh wait, there was.
Well, there's one place when we lived in Iraq.
Yeah, I know. Like Taji,
you and I.
It was a kilometer away. You see that big old burn pit where they were burning everything. Huh. Yeah.
Also, there was a burn pit on the JSS. I don't know if you knew this, but there was a burn pit on the JSS. And mind you, as we mentioned before, the JSS started off as a company size element, which then we created to bigger, but still that time, it was very, very small. Don't get me wrong. Like that was honestly, I feel like that was part of like Army protocol was like, hey, how do we get rid of all this stuff? Was, oh, we're just going to go burn it.
Set a fire, pour some diesel on it and burn it.
Diesel and burn it. Like we,
yep.
We burned waste for however many years. And now, you know, we also burned literally everything. I remember watching, and this is how I actually understood more about burning plastic water bottles, because I didn't think anything of it at the time. I was a young kid who did not know anything about environmental health or personal health or anything like that. So I'm watching them burn literally everything that you could possibly find. And it's all being burnt in this area. And we're all breathing it in, and no one is, me especially, I can only really speak for myself, but me, I didn't know any different. I thought it was all fine.
That's right. So. They burned lithium batteries.
They did. Yes,
they burned, and they burned like like dry cell batteries, lithium batteries. Everything we threw away, which was everything. Uniforms with the permethrin, the bug stuff.
Yes, we had a soldier who went home on R&R and never came back to Iraq. And once we determined he was not coming back, and he was a criminal at that point, they burned his uniform in the motor pool. Everybody's breathing it in because we didn't know any better.
Right.
The NCOs who were there were like, "This is what happens. We erased you." Blah blah blah. Like it was supposed to be a statement, like a this is what happens if you
ceremonial,
leave the Army. Yeah, kind of a ceremonial thing. But we're all just standing there watching this, breathing in all these chemicals and not knowing any better.
Yep.
So I apologize for interrupting. So go ahead.
No, that's fine. It's fine because it's a perfect illustration of how we were exposed to that stuff. And then, but that, think about that times however many, hundreds for these open burn pits they were using. Because they had these little front end loaders, and they'd stir the stuff up and pour some diesel on it, and set fire to it. And that's what got us, And there's a lot of people in the burn pit registry and all this stuff. So when and that's when the doc told me, you need to go online and do the burn pit registry through the VA, and I'm like, what the heck, I had no idea what was happening. So he put me on a P3 profile. Mm-hmm. And told me to walk my PT test. So I'm like, okay, I can pass my PT test now. And I thought it was done. I thought, okay, we're done. I'm coming up on PCS time. I'm going to go to Germany and do counterintelligence support for the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, which is the operational side of our job, which is, kind of the sexy side. It's not the sexy side, but if you want to put it on a scale of 1 to 10, it's like a 7.5 on the sexy scale, And so it's going to be really fun. What the DTRA does is any country, DTRA Germany, any country in Europe and parts of Asia that have nuclear capability, the international community sends teams to do inspections, right, to make sure they're not enriching uranium, make sure that all their nuclear facilities are safe and all that stuff, right? Well, there are interagency assets that go do these inspections. And so if there's Army assets with them, I would brief and debrief those guys when they go and come. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Now that's a very, very, glossed over, unclassified version of what we would do. But it was going to be a lot of fun, right? It's a nominative position, so I had to get my lieutenant colonel to sign off on it. My senior warrant officer at battalion, who's a CW5, he had to sign off on it. People are talking to people. People are, asking questions about Chief Parker. Is he worthy of this assignment? All this stuff, and I get the, the gold star and all this, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go do this really cool assignment. And then I get the phone call. Hey, is this CW2 Kevin Parker? I'm like, yes, it is. Okay, I'm calling to remind. This is on like a Monday. I'm calling to remind you that on Thursday you have your midboard briefing. I'm like, my what? Your midboard briefing. I'm like, I'm not getting midboard. no, yes, sir, you are. You have a P3 profile. I'm like, yeah, well, I know, but I can pass my PT test now, so I don't have a, well, no, you're getting med board. I'm like, okay, I'll be there. Well, as a CI guy, we wore civilian clothes, right? Dress, business casual, slacks, button-up shirt. We didn't wear a coat and tie unless we're going to see a general officer. But I show up, and everybody's like, "What are you here for?" I'm like, "I'm here for my med board briefing." "Why aren't you in uniform?" I'm like, "Well, this is my uniform." "That's not your uniform. You don't." I'm like, "Oh my god, listen." And I whip out my badge because that was our immediate defense. I'm a
Right.
CI guy. This is our uniform. "Oh well, but next time you come in here, you're going to be in uniform." I'm like, "I don't plan on coming back in here. I'm not getting med board." We weren't talking the same language.
Right.
They're telling me you're getting med boarded. I'm like, the heck I am. I'm not getting med boarded. But long story short, um, all the briefings, everything, I get in front of the Pueblo and I'm like, I'm not getting med boarded. She said, "Do you want to fight this?" I'm like, yes, I'm supposed to be going to, Germany. I'm going to do this cool job. And I was bitter. I was really, really bitter. I'm like, you don't understand. I've been doing investigations now for 8 years, or not, what is it, 7 years? I want to go do cool stuff. And so she says, well, I mean, we're still in a reduction phase. The med board process is part of that reduction. And like, but I'm a warrant officer. You're not supposed to, I was not happy. And Ginger was there with me because they said, bring your spouse or whatever. She was excited to go to Germany. And we're both kind of like, man, what the heck? So you go from the Pueblo to the lawyer. She doesn't represent the Army. She represents you, right? And the lawyer's like, listen, we can get you 100% from the VA. And so keep in mind, 100% from the VA means this much money. And I'm like, wow, oh man, okay. And so we're going to get you set up
things
to an
changed.
appointment. Well, and so, and so we get these figures in our head, and we're like the next appointment with the Pueblo was like 6 days, 7 days later, or whatever, like the next week. And so Ginger and I are talking things over, and like, I mean, I'm making like it was $125 or something less than I was on active duty, and I'm like, man, I mean, now I know why people say when you retire, like if you stay past 20, you're working for free. And I'm like, we're talking about it, and we're like, man, I just don't know. And we're starting to think things over, and I'm like, I still want to go to Germany, right? I still want to fight this. We're talking back and forth. We're kind of like playing, she's playing devil's advocate, and she's like, well, but if we don't, now let's just look at this. Let's look at this honestly. What if this doesn't go the way we want it to go? And I'm like, man, all right, look, maybe. And she said, you can go work for MICEP. MICEP, for those who may not know, military intelligence civilian expected career program. I don't know why it's called that, but basically I could have stepped out of my uniform and stepped right into a civilian job doing exactly what I was doing as a warrant officer,
There you go.
as a counterintelligence special agent. And I was like, man, but it's another career. At that point I was 50, I was 54. And it's a whole nother career.
Mm-hmm.
You don't start at the bottom. I mean, I'll start at, basically it's a GG14 start outs, which is the same as a GS14. It's the GG scale. It's intelligence. They use GG instead of GA or GS. And so I'd be making an 04 pay. And I'm like, but then they send you wherever they want to send you. You could go overseas. You could go to wherever. And I'm starting to think about it. And I'm like, and we really started thinking. And we're like, maybe we're just tired of moving around. Maybe we're tired of not knowing what's next. Maybe we're tired of just kind of tired,
Yeah.
And I'm going to get emotional, but I'm just going to get emotional.
Okay.
And we thought about it. And we're like, because I loved, Rob, I'm telling you, I loved what I did in the Army, and I was good at it. I was working with soldiers. Counterintelligence was an application program, even for enlisted. They've opened it up now where they're recruiting off the street. But at the time, we took applications and we did on the job training for folks going to SISAC. I did a lot of training with those guys, and watching those soldiers come from just name an MOS. and watching them catch on to the concepts of counterintelligence and watching them blossom and watching. They go to CISAC, counterintelligence special agent course. They go to CISAC and they come out and they're ready to go tackle the world. And knowing that we're putting quality soldiers in the face of adversarial intelligence officers and saying, I dare you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I dare you. And knowing that I was a part of that mechanism and I wasn't anymore. Sorry.
It's all right.
That was a tough pill to swallow. But swallow it, I did. You know? And eventually we decided, it's time to put down the saber, for lack of better terms. And so we tapped out. And, ditch went to somebody else. I don't know. There's other warrants out there that, and what makes me feel okay about it? Well, I have no choice but to feel okay about it. But outside of the therapy, and I'll get to that in a second, but I've gotten texts, Facebook messages, whatever, social media contact or whatever from people, from soldiers I've worked with, from in Korea, soldiers I work with here at Fort Bliss, soldiers that I've helped mentor that have told me they've applied for and gotten picked up for warrant, and they thanked me for my role in helping them get to that point, and that helps, knowing there's a legacy out there that I had a small part in, and then that helps a lot.
Yeah.
So when I was going through the med work process, I was also I'll go back to 2017 for to be specific about it. I was doing a report for a case, and I sent it up. We had a report hierarchy. There's a portal in which we put all our reports, and they go into the case file digitally. And I had done a report, and it goes up to company, because I'm the warrant officer in the office. My report goes to the company reports officer, and gets QA QC'd there. And once it got up there, the analyst at the company somehow got a hold of it, and he put some Word documents, so you put notes on the side and all that. Right. And somehow he put notes on it, and I'm like, who is this guy? What is he? Why is he reviewing my report? He's an analyst. He doesn't. If we need help, there's certain checks that he pulls, and then he puts his analytical notes on it or whatever, and he sends it to us, and that's what's his job. But he has no. It's not his lane to QA/QC my reports, and so he had put some stuff on there, and all he did really was, I put commas in places, and all he did was, uncalled for comma, unneeded comma, unneeded comma, unneeded comma. I'm like, and they're not Oxford commas. It's appropriate pronunciation, And I got mad. I got really mad, and I sent it back. And at the very bottom, I put notes to her, because sometimes she would miss details on the top, and then at the bottom I'll refer back to details, and she'd say, you should discuss this earlier in the report. So I put, you need to, please refer to paragraph 1- whatever. But then at the bottom on the last comma thing, I said, somebody doesn't like commas. And I went off on him. And then she emailed me on the unclass side. And I was not professional. I was not gentle. I went after this guy. And because I was like, why are you even on this report? You have no business. I was not at all gentle. And she emailed me and she said, I don't know if something's going on. If you need to talk, then, because she's a very nice person. If you need to talk or anything, just get some stuff out in the air or whatever, call me. And I was like, what? I went back to the report and I saw it. And I realized just how brutal. I went after him with both barrels.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized something was wrong. And I broke down right there in my office, man. I broke down. I was like, God, what is going on? This is not me. It hurt. And I was like, golly. The next day I had my senior rater counseling at like 11:30. And at 1 o'clock, I was at behavioral health. I was like, something's going on. Something is just not happening right. I don't know what's happening, but there's something going on that's causing me to do things like that. And that's not me. And so, long story short, I was eventually diagnosed with PTSD that manifests as anxiety disorder and depression. Mm-hmm. And so that went into the med board as well. That ran parallel to the pulmonary med. And so those were the two things I was med boarded for. And so with that, the VA, when I got out, they picked up on that, and I started counseling or therapy pretty much within a couple, 3 months out of getting out. And one of the things that the therapist was working with me on was, because when you get out of the Army, you've spent 20 plus years, however many years, like you mentioned earlier, my cat's going to jump up here. This is for everybody, that's a shadow. So you have this structure every day. You're told at 6:30 you'll be here, at 9 o'clock you'll be here, at 11:30 you'll be whatever. And then suddenly you get out, and you're kind of like, what do I do with my day? Some people, they might get out, they might go right back into a job where they're doing similar stuff, and they might never skip a beat. And for you folks, I say congratulations and more power to you. Some people don't. Some people are, they're stuck. They're in this abyss. They are unable to catch traction once they have that 214 in their hands, and they're kind of like just walking around bumping into things. Ricky Bobby, I don't know what to do with my hands.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do. They just don't. And the civilian world is unforgiving in some degree, in some ways. They don't care. And when I say they, I mean in general. I'll just give you an example. Driving. When you're on a military installation, people very generally follow the rules of the road. When you're out on the highway, or when you're out in the whatever town you live in, they don't care that you expect them to follow the rules of the road. They don't care that as a veteran, that might be one of your triggers for PTSD. They don't care that you're going to become just insanely angry at them for turning right in front of you and cutting them off. They don't care. That's just a small example. They just don't care. And so in a civilian, when you're looking for a job, or when you're not looking for, whatever the case may be, the civilian world in general just does not care. They say thank you for your service and all that stuff, but that's just a platitude most of the time. Some people genuinely do love veterans, but as a civilian world in general, they just don't care how you feel about things. So when I was trying to adjust to being a civilian, it was hard. And my therapist had to work with me. I carried every day. I thought I was not safe. I always sit, and people say it's a man thing. I'm going to tell you this, sitting with your back to the corner so you can see all the exits and stuff. Yeah, sure, there's a protective thing about that. I'm a man, I'm going to protect my woman, whatever the case may be. There's a veteran part of that too, where when you go in and you assess all the exits and you're thinking about that, and this is something my therapist had to work through with me. It's not all about being protective and all that stuff. There's a thing about that too, about where you still feel like you're in an environment where you're not safe. And it took me a while to get past that. So now I intentionally sometimes put myself with my back to the door just to see how I feel about it. And I've gotten to where I feel okay about it.
But not at first.
Thank God. No. For the first year.
Okay. I would not. How long did it? So it took about a year of just therapy.
It took about a year. It took about a year of therapy, and my therapist telling me, you're in El Paso. Listen, and now I have a therapist, the vet center. I now go to the vet center. The VA discharged me because my PTSD was stable, and they have veterans they're lined up at the door. They're literally lined up for therapy, and they can't just keep seeing you if you're stable. Thank God the vet center, they'll work you in. All right. So the vet center. I see a therapist there now, and he's fantastic. We have a similar sense of humor, which is important. And he speaks my language. He's really really smart on this stuff. And he made a comment. He very quickly caught on that I'm an analytical guy, and I was talking about carrying all the time and all that stuff. And he said, "Let me ask you a question." He said, "You're analytical. What's the likelihood that you'll be a victim of a violent crime here in El Paso?" I said, "It's really, really, it's almost non-existent." He said, "Then why? What's the point of carrying?" I said, "Because it's my God-given right, Second Amendment, blah, blah, blah." He said, "No, no, no, no. Outside of that, what's the likelihood of being a victim of a crime?" I said, "It's really low. Do you have to carry?" I was like, "No, but blah, blah, blah." And I start going off again, and he's like, "No, I mean, you can carry, sure, but do you have to carry for protection?" And it really got me to thinking, no, not really. And there's some liberty to that. There's some freedom to that, to knowing that you don't have to carry for your protection. There's some freedom to knowing that you don't have to sit with your back in the corner and analyze those escape routes when you walk in the door. There's some freedom to that. There's some emotional and mental freedom to knowing that you don't have to do those things, because that's tied to your combat experience. So that is why I learned a phrase from my active duty psychiatrist, not therapist, but psychiatrist. I learned a phrase, cognitive restructuring. So when we're in combat, we go through a heightened emotional or physical experience, and your hippocampus ties that to a response, or ties that to that event, or whatever the case may be. And so when you're exposed to a similar stimuli, I'll give you a perfect example. I was driving home, and a guy was working on the side of the road. A worker. He's wearing orange vest, orange big old freaking hat. He had a big old pole. He clearly was a worker. As I was approaching him, now thank God there was no other little traffic on the road. I'm driving on my Toyota Tacoma. I'm not a Humvee. I'm in a Toyota Tacoma. And I'm driving. I'm on the far right lane. And as I was approaching him, it's kind of like a little curve. And as I'm approaching him, he turned to face the road. I didn't even think. But immediately, that guy's about to do something, and I swerved all the way to the left shoulder, because at that moment, I was back in Iraq, and that guy was about to do something. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't have time to think. I reacted, right? So I immediately went to the left side of the road. It scared the shit out of me, Rob. And I talked to my therapist about that the next time. He said, "But that," and he went through all the 10-pound brain explanations of why that happened. He said, "But it's that cognitive restructuring. So the next time you see that guy, as you're approaching him, you're telling yourself, you're in El Paso, he's a worker, whatever the case may be, and you're reprogramming your hippocampus to understand this stimuli is not bad." And it takes a long time. It took me 57 years to get where I'm at right now. It's not going to happen overnight.
That's true.
It took 3 deployments to get all messed up. It's not going to be 2 or 3 exposures to get it fixed. Right? So that's something that we as veterans have to work on a lot, right? And so,
I don't mean to cut you off, but when was that? When did that happen? But how long ago did that happen?
2 years ago.
Okay, 2 years ago. Got it.
2 years? No. I'm sorry. Longer than that. We've been in this house for longer than that. Maybe 4 years ago. Probably 4 years.
4 years ago. So 4 years ago, you had that incident. Have you had another incident since?
No.
Okay.
Because I practice as we're driving. If I see things that kind of remind me of, I feel like I'm in like anything that reminds me of Iraq, I start telling myself, "Hey man, you're in El Paso. That guy's he's not putting anything on the roadside. He's not going to turn and throw a freaking grenade." They had those, what were they, RP7s, or you remember the grenades they had that exploded on contact, they'd freaking chunk them at your vehicle. He doesn't have one of those, right? So just chill, man. Tranquilo.
Yeah.
Tranquilo.
I will tell you that I probably I do the same thing. Like there are times where I'm driving down the road, there's a box, or there's trash, or there's something on the side of the road, and I change lanes. It still happens, right? But again, I also have to tell myself, I'm in Central Texas. There's nothing at the moment that's really causing this other than my brain. So yeah, I understand, and I think that a lot of other people probably still go through that. And I want to encourage that everybody who does really take the lead that you, or take your lead and go see a therapist, go see someone about this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I got a bracelet on, the 22 a day from Valhalla Project. And that is something, when I first started going to therapy, I can't tell you how many times I broke down in the therapist office. And listen, hey man, I'm a grown man. I'll tell you, I broke down a lot because of that statistic. 22 of us a day smoke ourselves. 22 a day, 22. And that is unsatisfactory. We need, as a group, I, I have a lot of my friends here in El Paso are veterans, and I check on them at least, I won't say frequently, but regularly. When I see them, I ask them how they're doing. I make sure that they're okay. I make sure they have a support structure, because we have to look after each other. Because if we don't, who is? Like I told you, the civilian sector doesn't care. I mean, they don't. And we have to be, as a group, we have to care about each other. Right. So that's something we have to look after each other. And again, please don't, I'm not trying to ostracize the civilian sector. We have a lot of support from a lot of civilian organizations, and a lot of people out there who have never served, who have never even, I mean, when they drive by a military organization, that's as close as they ever get. And I get it. And there's a lot of people out there that really do good work for us. I'm just saying, in general, we know how to take care of ourselves better than anybody does. So we have to look after ourselves. We do, you know. And so check on your brothers and sisters, man. You have to do it. You have to check on your brothers and sisters. So my cat's being crazy. Don't you do that. Don't you do that. You can edit that part out. I'm just joking.
No, I'm keeping it.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Oh my gosh. How often he does that. He just jumped up on my liquor cabinet.
Well, you know,
maybe he's thirsty. Anything. He probably is. He acts drunk anyway. So
that's fair.
He's kind of crazy.
That's fair.
Yeah. He's about to poke his head over the edge. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. So a quick question about this, though, is as you were going through your mental health, your behavioral health scenarios and things, you're retiring or you're being med boarded out, right? And so now you're going through this, but now the uniform is coming off. What's the next? What's the next phase that you have to go through?
And that was something that I had to figure out, right? Because I didn't know. We had to kind of sort that out. Was I going to get another job? There he is. I told you he's going to poke his head. Was I going to just retire? Hey, Shadow, what are you doing? It all boiled down to finances. It's something we talked about too, as we were kind of catching up before we started. So my wife, I got to give a lot of credit to her. She's always been, let's say it this way. My daughter, my youngest daughter, she played flute for 7 years between high school and college. I saw her perform twice.
Okay.
In that 7 years, if that gives you an idea how much I was gone. So my wife she was a single parent, basically, and she managed our household. Right? That's what I say she did. She managed our household. So she had our finances set up in a way such that I didn't have to go back to work if I didn't want to. And I'm so thankful for that. Again, I mentioned I think I was going to make about $125 less being retired. CW2 retired with 100% disability. So I didn't have to go back to work. And that was something I talked through my therapist too. Do I have to go back to work, or should I put that pressure on myself? And we had long conversations about that. There was times we spent the entire hour of a session talking about what I wanted my next step to look like. And I had a lot of hobbies. I used to grow peppers. Before the GI doc shut me down, because my GI doc said, it's time to cut back on the capsaicin. And I said, well, now, can you explain that? Because I mean, for you, that might mean cut the jalapenos, but for me, when I eat a pizza, I put scorpion peppers.
Right.
And
I think I remember you posting Facebook videos or YouTube videos of you eating
yeah,
hottest peppers that you could find.
yeah, I was growing scorpion peppers, and when I was growing Carolina Reapers, I would eat them in things. But I was chasing some capsaicin like it was going out of style, man. But there's an endorphin response to that too.
Mm-hmm.
So you eat a hot pepper, and when you have survived the event, there was a couple of times I didn't think I was going to. You get this hit of endorphins, and it's really nice. And the GI doc was like, they did my routine scopes, and they got into my upper GI tract and realized that I was tearing things up. So she said, you need to cut back on that. And I was like, well, now how far back? What are we talking about? Because I'm up here. Do you want me to
Yeah.
go here or here or here? And so, yeah,
Some
so
people
no more
chase
gardening.
adrenaline by bungee jumping and skydiving.
Yeah,
Kevin
yeah. I
Parker
was just eating.
chases the hottest peppers he can find or
I was
grow.
eating the hottest peppers I could. Yeah, I was growing and eating the hottest peppers I could get my hands on. So, the one chip challenge, I tried that, and it barely even registered on the radar. I was like, this isn't even hot. It tastes like cardboard. That was the
Okay.
worst part of it. It tastes like cardboard. The chip was just terrible, but the heat level, it didn't even. I got a video of that, I don't think, on YouTube. It didn't even hit the radar. My son-in-law almost died the first bite. He almost died. I'm like, this isn't even hot. So I used to garden. I used to grow hot peppers. I was playing violin up until I kind of realized it's not a thing anymore. But I have started um, Legos. There's an adult version of Legos that are,
First off, I'm going to interrupt. I'm going to interrupt
yeah.
because, well, you can't see them in the background, but they're there.
Oh man,
There is no such thing as Legos. It is Lego, Lego bricks.
my apology. My son, my junior brother would say the same thing. Lego. You're exactly right. So
Yes.
we recently got. Oh well, she's been playing. She's been playing. She's been building with Lego her entire life. Um, Her mom was in the hospital, and because of the treatment she was undergoing, she couldn't have natural flowers.
Okay.
And so her brother said, "Let's go to Walmart," and he bought there's like a
Yep. I
plum
know exactly
blossom.
what you're talking about. Yes.
Okay,
The all
what
the
were
Lego
the
plants that I have
yeah
been
yeah
told
yeah yeah.
I'm not allowed to build.
Oh no, oh no. Well, there's the black F1 car.
Hmm.
I saw that in the aisle, and I was like, what is this? And he said, it's a Lego car, man. I was like, this is phenomenal. So long story short, I now have all the F1 cars. I've got the Ferrari, the Lamborghini Sian, I've got the Porsche RSR, the Porsche 911 Turbo. I've got all kinds of stuff. They're incredible. They're incredible. The detail, the functionality, it's just incredible. So I put together Lego. I have on the way, I have a wooden ship model of the Albatross. I think it's a Finnish ship, but it's a it's two mast. I think it's two mast. It's got all the rigging. Oh, it's phenomenal. That goes back to, I used to put together the plastic ones, right? From the like Revell model, the Cuddy Sark. I did the Constitution. And those were easier because like the rat lines were plastic. All the rat lines were preformed. You just glue them on there, but you had to do some rigging between the masts and stuff. You have to tie the individual rat lines. You have to glue on the individual boards for the planking and the deck. They're
Oh
incredible.
wow, it's
So
very very
yeah, it's gonna
involved.
be it's gonna be great. I'm gonna do a YouTube series on my first one.
Okay.
You'll dig that. I might actually hit you up for some tips. I don't know. I got to get a tripod for a camera. I'm gonna see if I can I've got a couple of older, not GoPro style cameras and stuff. Try to figure out how to set it up so that it's more presentable. And I got the high power rocketry stuff and all that. But I'll get into those in more detail later. Anyway, talking to my therapist about, do I have to go back to work? And she was like, I got blown up in Al Shab, 50 pounds of AHME, boom, right beside my freaking truck. Right, it hit hard enough that it blew the heat shield off of the 240 Bravo.
Okay.
Right, so it was a pretty good thump. Right. Well, apparently, I got a freaking TBI from that. I didn't know it at the time, But and it was funny too. We were doing the post explosion thing, clearing thing with the medics, and the medic says, "Is there anything that you've forgotten since before the blast?" And I was like, "Would I remember that I had forgotten it?" Or and he
An
literally stopped and
interesting
looked at the
question.
doc. He said, "Do you see these questions? Do you?" And so I was like, "I don't. How would I know if I've forgotten something if I forgot it?" Anyway, I had a this is, I mean, I don't know, 2018 or something, 2019. Um, I had a MRI of, my brain, and the neurologist is like doing the scroll thing through the layers of the MRI, and this really bright white spot in the image. He said, "Well, there's your TBI." I was like, "Wait, what? My what?" "Well, you have a TBI, right?" And I was like, "I mean, I, I didn't know that." "Well, you got hit or something, right? You hit your head, or you got the explosion or something." Like, well, I mean, I took a couple of hits personally, sure. Because I also, on my first deployment, on my second deployment, I got hit with a 155 round, or 152, whatever it was, went off in a pothole right beside my vehicle. That was a pretty good thump too. Apparently, one of those registered as a TBI on my brain. So I have problems remembering things. I have problems stringing together sentences and stuff sometimes. So I go to cognitive therapy for that. Another thing veterans should do: hit the VA up about cognitive therapy. It's phenomenal. Anyway, so anything I do Lego, these models, I have the VA provided for me a tablet on which they've installed cognitive therapy, like digital cognitive therapy. It's great. But I
Okay.
do these things. And so the therapist was like, as long as you can stay engaged and don't just become a couch potato and you do nothing, reading, do you have to work? I mean, if you're financially capable of not working, then you don't have to work. I have a service dog. That was something that my active duty psychiatrist suggested. He said, "I think you're a good candidate for a service dog," and we can talk through that process. America's Vet Dogs was the organization through whom I got the service dog.
Okay.
It took, when that COVID got a vote in that, I applied for it, and then COVID delayed the thing by 4 months. But it's a pretty decent process. They want to weed them out because they were being very more welcoming on their applicants, but then they learned that veterans were getting them, and then they were turning them into pets because it was a free dog that was
Gotcha.
trained.
Right.
So they kind of made it more stringent, just to kind of truncate the process. Basically, you have to prove you're disabled. You have to prove that your disability can be benefited by a service dog. And so through that, there's video, there's VTC with a psychiatrist or with a provider. If it's a physical thing, if you need help with mobility or something, it'll be obviously a doc or whatever. But yeah, it's a really good program. It's free to the veteran. I paid $80, so $40 for my baggage there, $40 for my baggage back. They house you in very billets style housing, but they feed you definitely not DFAC style food. That was really good food. But I have a service dog. His name is Ed. He's a yellow lab. Yeah, I don't. What made me realize I didn't have to work, I guess, was that again, the financial aspect of it, and then can you hold down a job? And at the time, keeping in mind that the Army, my final release date from the Army was June 9th of, because when you ETS or whatever, I guess, or when you separate and you retire, I think it's the last day of the month, or is it the first day of the month when you actually your separation date when you retire. When you med board, I retired as a result of a med board. There's an odd date, so it was June the 9th was my actual retirement date of 2021. So back then, which has been a few years now, but at that time, I couldn't imagine going back into a job, right? And
Right.
and and with my skill set, could I do something? I have a buddy of mine. He's a imagery analyst. He works at the Sergeant Major Academy, so he does the distance learning for the Master Sergeant course for the Sergeant Major Academy. And he said, when I get out, I'm going to just go be a greeter at Walmart for a while, just for some mad money. But you have to think about that because people, like I was a warrant officer, he's a master sergeant. I've seen on your show you've had some majors, lieutenant colonels, you've had some guys that are, what do you do? You've been in a position where you've led soldiers, you've commanded soldiers, you've commanded battalions, you've been an XO for a battalion, you've done. I was a deputy ops officer for a field office. I was an investigator. He runs an education program. I mean, they give him the POI and then he develops the curriculum. What do you do when you retire? You've got this incredible skill set that you've developed over 20 plus years, but you're tired.
Yeah.
You don't want to go and continue to lead and for civilians who, well, I can't be at work today because, my poodle is sick or whatever. I don't know. I'm just, but that's how some civilians.
You're not that far off. You're really
so
not
you
that
see
far
what I'm
off.
saying? So, and we're in the military. You're at work unless life, limb, or eyesight, bro. You show up to work, right? You've got to have a reason signed by somebody more important than me if you're not going to be at work. And civilians are like, no, I just don't feel like coming in today. What do you get your, so you can't do that in civilian sector. So you got this incredible skill set. How do you, now granted, SFL TAP and all these things, I mean, there's programs in the Army to help you do that. But maybe you don't want to. Maybe you want to go be a greeter at Walmart for a while. Maybe you want to do something low key where you can just go in and do some menial tasks for a while. And just kind of be trying to chill for a little bit. But the world kind of wants more of you because they look at your resume and they're like, whoa. We don't want you on the door saying, well, hi, welcome to Walmart. We want you over here in management, developing programs. I don't want to do that, So it's hard. So I chose not to do anything. I chose to grow peppers and eat them. You know what I mean? So that's what I chose to do. And I was able to do that. Thank God. Because again, I give credit to my wife for that because she managed our finances to where we could do that.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned this, like, so now that you're retired, you don't have to go to work every day, but you also say, all right, well, I have to do something with my brain. And it's not just specifically for you, right? This is really for everybody who's retiring, or completely retiring, who are not going to go to work the next day. There's going to be, there's still years left in your life that you don't want to just lay on the couch and do nothing or sit in a recliner and do nothing all day, every day. What I like about what you were saying earlier is that, yes, you decided to chase the adrenaline of capsaicin. I don't know who would want to do that. But you also build Lego, you build models. Yeah. But I want to get into the fun stuff that you do. I think you know what it is.
Yeah. So, I do I guess the two hobbies I have that probably work a little toward the adrenaline and cognitive. My cognitive therapist loves that I do these things too. I do high power rocketry and I also fly RC airplanes. And those two things involve building. I do a lot of soldering actually for high power rocketry, soldering tiny little circuit boards together. I had to teach myself how to solder. And then those control aspects of the rocket flight, it was specifically recovery. So you have to program those to do certain things. It's not a very steep learning curve, but there's a learning curve to that. But then the RC airplanes, you have the radio programming for the receiver and so on and so forth. So there's learning curves to that. And depending on what brand you use or which company you use, some are very common. YouTube University, you can learn all of it through there. But the biggest thing is, and we have this saying in RC airplanes, is taking off is optional, landing is mandatory. Yeah. And so gravity is going to win. It doesn't matter how good or how bad you are as an RC pilot or a real pilot. Gravity is going to win. So you have to kind of know what you're doing. Some of these airplanes, I bought one, was it a year and a half ago, I guess. I bought my first new airplane in a long time, and I spared no expense on building it. I had probably $3,500 in this airplane. and I took off with it. And I did my trim passes, because new airplane, make sure all the surfaces are trimmed so it'll fly straight and level, hands off, should fly straight and level at about mid throttle. And so I was doing my trim passes, getting everything trimmed out, and I was satisfied with it. And I was turning directionally. I was turning from flying west to flying north to come around to fly back to the east. And as I was making that turn, suddenly I lost contact with
Oh
it.
no.
And I thought the motor went out. I thought it was a dead stick, and I can land a dead stick. It's not that big a deal because it's about 150 feet up. So you have plenty of altitude. If the motor goes out, not a problem. It's no wind that day, so it's not, it's probably, I don't know, 75 feet off the northwest corner of the runway. Not a big deal. Bring it back around, land it, not a problem. So the motor cut out. I was like, oh, shoot, dead stick. And I moved the right stick, which is the aileron and the elevator, and nothing happened. I was like, wait a minute. And so I took both sticks and went, and nothing happened. I was like, oh, I have no control. And I watched my beautiful airplane make this graceful yet terrifying and it hit, and it was probably, I'm going to say it was 200 meters maybe out into the desert. Because again, I'm in El Paso.
Yeah.
Beyond this IV line where I couldn't see where it actually hit. And I got out there, and it was just a big pile of sticks. And
Man.
once I recovered everything I could recover, I had to send the motor in, and they charged me $120 to repair the motor. But I was out around $2,000.
Oh man.
And yeah, I was just gutted. And so I stopped using that particular radio brand, and I bought a new one. Steep learning curve on this particular radio, but they're made in the Czech Republic. They have an incredible reputation. And so I changed all my receivers over to that radio system. And it's been a pretty wild ride, but it's fun. It is a lot of fun, and the things that you can make, because all RC aircraft are wildly overpowered, and you can do some really incredible things with them. I'm not that good yet. I can do some things that are really fun to watch, but what we've gotten into recently, me and some guys at my club, is called flying IMAC, which is the International Model Aeronautics Club flying, which is precision flying. So you have to fly straight and level, and then you pull up at a 45. It has to be 45, and you fly that for a specific time. Then you roll over. It has to be perfectly inverted, straight and level. You pull and you do this inverted half loop and come back at the same line. There's a lot of different things, but it's fun because it's precise, and you're deducted points if it's not precise. Again, I told my cognitive therapist about it. She was blown away. So you're saying that if it's off a degree, you deduct the points. I'm like, right. She said, well, that's incredible because you have to by eyeball, and it's 200 feet away. You have to, and she's just blown away by the things I do. She said, you're the model veteran. And I'm like, what does that even mean? She said, well, you're chasing hobbies that keep your brain working.
Right.
And I'm like, I guess, I don't know. I just don't want to sit on the couch. So, but it's true, And then the model rocketry, my goal is to hit 10,000 feet by the end of the year in altitude. So, and that's above ground level, not above sea level. It's easier above sea level because we're at 3,800 feet. At only 7,000 feet, I've already hit that.
Yeah.
There's a lot to that. It's not just a matter of stick a big motor in a small rocket and do it, because you got to recover the thing. The entire flight cycle is prepare, launch, recover, and everything be in good shape. It's got to be able to launch again. Otherwise, it's not a successful launch. So I got a fiberglass rocket that will take it. It'll take the thrust needed to do that. But I got a GPS equipment I've got to prepare and become familiar with. The recovery or the dual deployment recovery system I have, it fires 1.5 grains of black powder at apogee, and it puts out a drogue parachute, and it comes down to 600 feet, and then it fires another 1.5 grains, and it puts out this, a 48-inch main recovery chute, and it brings it very gently down to the ground. then the GPS tells you where it happened at, because from 10,000 feet, it could be
anywhere.
It could be a mile away. It could be 600 feet away, or it could be a mile and a half away. So I've watched guys out there at the launch site do, they've hit 18,000 feet, and their rocket land a mile and a half away, and they've got their GPS equipment. They jump in a truck, and then 2 hours later they come back with their rockets. So it can take a while. So it's a lot of fun, though. It is a lot of fun. And then again, soldering these little pieces together, and you test them. I've got a mason jar, and with Christmas lights, and you put the Christmas lights in where the igniters would go, and I got a brake bleeder. So you pull a vacuum on the mason jar. Pulling the vacuum on the mason jar, it simulates a launch because the air pressure changes. And then when you stop pulling the vacuum, that tells the controller it's at apogee. So that fires that apogee charge. So that first Christmas light.
Right.
And then as it comes down, it reads 600 feet, and it fires the other Christmas light. It's just neat stuff that I've learned throughout this hobby, and it's really cool. And you get exercise because you walk a mile sometimes, or you don't know where it's at. You just you know what? We've all done some form of, most of us, the Army guys, and maybe the Marines. And I don't think the Navy does land nav because you're not on land.
Depends on
your Air job. Force. Well, that's true. Air Force, you fly over it, but but for the veterans who have been exposed to land nav, as we're standing on the launch site, you see your parachute coming down, and you just point at something over on the horizon, and you just dead reckon, and hope you walk across your rocket. It's just, and you're using land nav skills. If you have to go around a bush, you go to the right this side, and then you go to the left next time. You're using land nav skills. And I've not lost a rocket. Well, that's not true. I lost one rocket because I put a really, really big motor in a really, really small rocket. And that thing took off like a top fuel dragster. And I never saw it again. We didn't see where it ejected, because usually there's a trail of smoke right before it ejects. There's a trail of smoke, so you can track and see where it ejects. We didn't see the trail of smoke. We have that thing's out in the desert.
No idea where it is.
Nope, not a clue. Not a clue. That thing was gone. And one of my buddies, he's a retired MP. He goes out there. He's got a quad. He gets on his quad and he runs around in the desert trying to find it. He was out there for probably 2 hours. He's like, man, I don't know where it's at. So we just check it off as a loss. I mean, the rocket was only like $60, so it's not like I was out a lot of money. But that thing was gone.
Not a $2,000 RC plane.
No. So yeah, but it was, but again, that's part of the learning curve. To hit 10,000 feet, you got to realize, oops, I should have had some kind of tracker in that thing. I'd walk right to it. So,
yeah.
But fun stuff. It's fun. Just living my life. Again, it took me about a year. I was depressed. And when I can't stress that enough, I was depressed. There were some times that I was severely depressed. I don't want to, I just need to make sure that was clear. Severely depressed. That first year, there were some times it was dark, because I didn't know. I'd lost my purpose, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was trying. I was trying. I was going and flying airplanes. I was working on my RC, my high power rocketry stuff, because there's levels you have to hit in order to buy certain components for this stuff. And I was working on that, and we were gardening. Like I said, my wife and I were doing stuff in the backyard, growing peppers and flowers and all kinds of stuff. And we were doing it. But looking back, I was faking the funk. You fake it till you make it, right? And I was just trying to, I was falling, at least I was falling forward, but at the end of the day, and I made it, that's the key point. I made it. But man, that first year was rough. It really was. So, but now, I'm happy. My wife and I are content. We're really, we're relearning each other. Because before, it was like honeymoons every year, every 2 years, you get another honeymoon because we've been gone. It's like when we were in 17 Cav, man, you deploy and you're home for a year, but you're not home for that year. Right. Between NTC and field exercise and all that stuff, you're home for 4 months, but you're not home for that year. ranges, gunnery, you're not home, so you're not home. So, yeah, we were just, but now that we're home, I'm home all the time, and we're not tired of each other. So that's a raging success.
That's a plus.
Yeah, that's a huge plus. And for those, I don't know, Rob knows some of it, and some of the people that are watching might know, but we've been together for 40 years. Mm-hmm. And so we had that going for us. But, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to plug this because I think it's important. We did couples therapy through the vet center after that year. When that year I went through therapy, then I was probably another 6 months in therapy. We decided to go through couples therapy, and we did because I was so miserable because of I could not break this PTSD cycle. I never got mad at her. I don't get mad. I get short. I get snippy. She understands it, and she tells me, and we sit and we talk about it. And so, it's part of it, right? But I get mad at inanimate objects. If something's not, like, I don't know, something doesn't come out of the cabinet, I want to throw the thing across the kitchen, or what, God, this fuse is this long. She wanted to go to therapy to learn how to help me navigate that and how she could navigate that. And we did. And it worked out really well. So I'm telling you, we don't have to do this, we as veterans, we don't have to do this alone. If you're married, if you have kids, there are resources out there for veterans to help us as a family unit to navigate this stuff. And don't discount that. Use it. Don't discount your family members, because they can be resources too.
Right.
People ask me especially when I was in the Army, hey, you've been married for X number of years. Tell me how it works, and tell me what I need to know. I've been married for 3 years. What do I need to know? And I tell people, and I told my cognitive therapist this the other day, you have to cherish your other half. You have to communicate before it becomes a problem, and you're not always right. Those are the 3 things I learned as a husband that I think has made our marriage probably better. That my wife's just rock star. She's just a rock star. I mean, she's unconditional love, and she's just been so supportive. So, but for me, those are the 3 things I've incorporated as a mantra, if you will, that I think has helped her help me the most. So, yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I love it. All right. So, Kevin, we're going to wrap up, and I've got 2 more questions. Technically 3. And we're going to first start off with this question that I ask everybody. What's one piece of advice after that many years that you spent in the Army, getting in and out multiple times? What's one thing that you want someone to know who's getting out now?
Who's separating now? One thing. I have to keep it at one thing?
Yeah. Just try to keep it to 1.
Okay, so if my buddy, for instance, who's about to retire, came to me and said, what is one thing I need to know as I'm approaching separation? I would have to say, get plugged into the VA and do not take no for an answer. The VA is our biggest resource. People, listen, there are people who live in places where the VA is not that great. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, I live in El Paso. El Paso VA is phenomenal. But that doesn't mean your VA can't be great. That's why I say don't take no for an answer, because the VA is there to repay us through services and through benefits, through whatever, for what we've done for our country. So don't take no for an answer. There's somebody at your VA whose job it is to make other people do their job. So if you go to your local VA and you're not getting the service you need to find that button and smash on it until that person that's not doing their job does their job.
There you go. I also want to say that I've talked to people who work for the VA as VA civilians. They're going through some tough times because there's some reforms going on within the VA. But to your point, if you keep pushing that button, if you keep saying this isn't working, somebody who needs to hear it is going to hear it, and they're going to have to act in order to make sure that the veteran is getting what they deserve. This becomes a two-way conversation, not only with the VA employees pushing back to their bosses, but also the veteran pushing back because of this and this and this. And so
that's right.
That conversation then moves to VA leadership, and they have to rethink their reforms.
Exactly.
That's a completely layman response. Somebody who speculates things, and I have no idea what happens in the VA as an employee. All I know is how I get treated as a veteran.
Right. Yeah. At echelons above, like local and regional level, we don't know.
Yeah. No idea.
But what you're saying has to be right. It has to be right. Yep. Real quick story. When I got my service dog, we were told at America's Vet Dogs that your service dog should be covered under the program called Dog of Record, where the VA will pay for your dog's health care.
Okay.
Right. So when I got back, I filed the paperwork, and I didn't know where it was. It just kind of fell into some black hole somewhere. I didn't know what was going on. And so I kept asking people. I kept asking all the people I could, what's going on? What's going on? I should be getting some kind of answer or something. I never got an answer, and I could not figure it out. It was a year and a half. I never heard anything. So I finally called Veronica Escobar's office. I didn't know what else to do. I finally called Veronica Escobar's office because she's always sending emails and stuff to her constituents. If you need help or whatever, make sure you call our local office. So I called the local office. By the way, the main guy here at our local office is a retired sergeant major. So that makes it even better. And so I told him what was going on. It's like, I haven't heard anything. I've not heard yes, no, or no. I've heard nothing. The day after I called him, I got a phone call from a guy, someone in the office here. It turns out he was denied because he's only for PTSD. It has to be for like mobility, sight, hearing, some other kind of physical condition for it to be covered under Dog of Record. Dogs who are just for PTSD are not covered under Dog of Record. I'm like, why couldn't you tell me that 18 months ago? I wasn't mad about it. I was just like, somehow communication coming back down to me failed. And all I needed was that. That's all I needed, So, but to that point, that's where, that community, like you said, a conversation has to happen. And now we as veterans need to be patient. Listen, I was a warrant officer. My job was to jump on people's desks. Mm-hmm. That was my job. The mission has to happen, right? I don't care who I piss off. I don't care whatever. I don't care. I will stand on who to make the mission happen. And so I don't care if I stand on who. I don't care. I don't care. If I don't get the right answer from you, I'm going to call somebody else. So, but I also had to be professional about it. So I was just, anyway, Next question.
I half expected you to say that I finally got this phone call and they said, Mr. Parker, the next time you kick off a congressional, can you give me a heads up? Apparently you just randomly
No. That's funny. That'd have been great though, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And so, okay, so the second question is, what's one thing that you have done your entire Army career that you cannot get rid of?
That I can't personally? Okay. All right. Okay. I'm going to tell this story, and it's not embarrassing. I don't care. But it embarrassed me at the time, and I felt really bad about it. We were in TC. This is great. We were in TC, and oh my God, I kind of you need to personally send this to Gary Keaton so he can have a chuckle, and maybe even Jason Strong. But we were in TC. Listen, man, I didn't grow up as a scout. I went into it as a staff sergeant, and that was bad because I probably should have grown up as a scout. I didn't know the 240. I mean the 25 Mike like I should have. My gunner that I was given was not. Let's just say he was not. He was like a 5 out of 10. Had a live fire range, and so we were sitting. So firing lines this way, like fire down ranges this way. We're sitting this way, getting ready to roll up because they're doing the troops on the ground are doing small arms contact, and then we're going to roll up and do. Further down, there's like a target down there we're going to hit with 25. And so we're waiting to roll up. And so Sergeant Keaton's in a Humvee behind us, and we're on the radio. And I'm like, so when do I cycle to ghost round? He said, when you get up on the fire. And so we get up on the firing line, and we go through the cycle to ghost round. And when my gunner squeezes the Cadillacs, nothing happens. Well, we didn't hear, normally you hear the gun shaking, right?
Yeah.
And you hit the misfire, go through the misfire procedures, shaking, and then there's a round on the bolt face ready to go. That we didn't hear that happen. And so I was like, well, do you think it's because it's on manual safe? And he goes, oh no. So I reach up there and I flip it off manual safe, go through misfire procedures, boom. Now the gun is still elevated. And so this round, right? And you see it all the way through tracer burnout. That 3,850 meters off into the sky. And I'm like, oh my God. So, yeah. So we continue with the training and exercise, and we get back. As soon as we get out of the Bradley, Sergeant Keaton comes up to me and says, Top wants to see you. So we go to see Top, and all he said is, negligent discharge, 25 Mike, mandatory field grade. Get out of my face. And I'm like, oh my God, man. So we go back to where the vehicles were parked, tried to go to sleep that night, wake up the next day. Colonel Costanza shows up next day, squadron commander. He sees me. How you doing, Sergeant Parker? I said, I don't know, sir. I've been better. He said, oh, you'll be fine. And I'm like, I don't know, dude. Last thing I heard, it was a mandatory field grade. And I can't go through this as a doggone private. There's no way. I mean, I'm 36 years old, 37 years old. I'm going to go through this as a private after seeing how privates get treated in this unit? No way. No way. Like, I will go AWOL. I'm not going through this unit as a private. There's no way. And so there's just no way. And so, then it turns out that as soon as that happened, the NTC 06, the cadre told their 06, their 06 called Iron 6. And this is how that conversation happened. Was he on the firing line? Yes, he was. Was the range hot? Yes, he was. Was it a training exercise? Yes, it was. Where's the problem? It just sounds like it needs more training. So they did a 15-6, and that's what the conclusion was. SM needs more training. So Sergeant Lamb, who was the platoon, kind of like Mike Goff, the platoon. I mean, that's not an official position, but you know what I'm saying. It's like a platoon has an unofficial Mike Goff. He took me down to the motor pool after the conclusion of the 15-6, and he ran through the procedures again with me and kind of spun me up on it. But bro, that was horrendous. So yeah, I was like, oh man, I'm never. They took away, because during the NTC you have the 25 is loaded. They took that away from me. I only had coax, which now I smoked some people with that coax though. I'll tell you that right now, we smoked some fools with that coax. But yeah, that was pretty bad. So that was also when I started questioning my idea of being a scout. I was like, I don't know anything about this job. So yeah, that was great.
Awesome. So that's something that you won't live down. But what's one habit that you picked up from the Army that you can't get rid of?
Oh, you wanted that. Well, you can edit that whole thing out if you want to.
Oh no, that's staying in now.
Oh, you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube.
No. Generations from now, we'll be hearing about this.
Yeah, they'll be showing this at doggone Fort. What is that? Fort Benning now is where Cav Scout School is.
Yeah.
Let's see. That's fine. I don't care. Like I said, man, hey, as long as you include the 35 Lima stuff. One habit that I can't put down. Probably every clock I have is set 24-hour time.
Interesting.
I can't not do that. And my daughter works in healthcare, so she runs on 24-hour time too. So we discuss time with each other in 24-hour clock. I can't not do that. And then probably saluting. I salute everybody. I go to the airfield, and I have a good friend at the airfield. Now we're generationally separate. He was a Vietnam veteran, or he is a Vietnam veteran. He's a Marine. He got out of the Marines as a sergeant. He was actually in, oh God, what is that Marine base that was up there, kind of sandwiched between Laos and Cambodia? That Marine base up there in Vietnam. I can't remember, but he was up there during the Tet Offensive. That dude went through some stuff. But I see him and I salute him, And he's like, I'm an NCO. Why are you saluting me? That kind of thing. But I just salute people everywhere. I mean, I go on Fort Dix and I just salute people walking into the PX. I just salute people everywhere. I don't know. I salute
that explains
my son-in-law.
why you started this show with a salute.
Yeah, with a salute. Yeah. I mean, my son-in-law is an E5 in the Air Force, and I see him and I salute him. I don't know. It's a salute thing. I don't know. That's my greeting is I salute people. So yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. And 25 Mike misfires. That's the thing too.
And that's something else that you do constantly.
Don't put me around 25. Yeah.
Okay, and then your last question. What is your YouTube channel? I want to plug that real fast.
Yeah, K Parker JF as in Juliet Foxtrot. Yeah, because that boat's going to be super cool. It's going to be neat.
Yeah, I'm going to leave a link up above, and then also leave a link down in the description. All right, Kevin, thank you for meeting with me this afternoon. It was super great talking to you. I swear I could talk to you for another 2 hours.
I don't, Rob. Hey, it has been really good, man. Since we linked up on Facebook, I've been looking for an opportunity to sit and just chew the fat with you. It's been really good.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Everyone, take a moment, like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this literally with everyone you can find, and later, lads.